Hey, Steve. We're back with another episode of the Steel Target Paint podcast. We're getting back on a good schedule. This is a week after the last one we did. How you been?
I'm doing good, Jeff. How you doing? You been shooting at all?
You know, I actually went and shot tonight. I didn't shoot for a week after the West Florida Championships. I took some time off. You know, I shot 6 guns, but being the match director and working with Dean, who was a range master, it took a lot out of me. So I took a week off and relaxed. But I was out at the range, and you'll never guess what I was doing today.
Uh-oh. Tell me.
I didn't shoot a single stage.
Really? What were you doing?
I was working on draws.
Hey, there you go.
You know, and this is something I want to point out to people out there is that, you know, it's one thing, it's great, you know, you set up roundabout or pendulum or 5 to go and you shoot that, but you're really only focusing on that stage. And when you think about it, and of course you and I have talked, I call the first shot the draw, even if you're talking about a rimfire or a rifle. You've got that 4 times on virtually every stage except for one stage, outer limits. And if you can cut a 1/10 of a second off, you're almost at a half second off your total time just in your first shot. In fact, I saw that training video that you posted working with Chris Barrett. I think it was on Accelerator, and I think his draw was like a .49.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was Accelerator.
And that's huge. You know, if you've got a point, I think mine, I'm probably good at .65, .7. So the difference between a .49, let's make it easy, call it a .5 and a .7, that's 0.2 of a second. That's 0.8 of a second just on 4 shots.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so, you know, I've been focusing a little more on the centerfire gun. So I went out and took the open gun, and I took the dot off the SIG because I'm going to run production and limited this weekend, and also brought the single stack of all guns.
Heck yeah.
And, you know, 10-inch plate at 10, 15, and 18 yards, working on some draws. So it was good. How about you? You been doing much shooting?
Well, you know, I was going to say the same thing, that I took a week off after shooting the West Florida match, and then I realized, that's a lie. I got my 1911 back from Luke at KKM. I put a blog post out there to talk a little bit about that experience, and had a little bit of frustration with my 1911. And, you know, Jeff, I'm definitely a better rifle or long gun shooter than I am a handgun shooter. But there were times where I had flashes of brilliance with my 1911, and then there was flashes of something that wasn't so brilliant. And so I've always had great luck with KKM barrels and drop-in, and also gunsmith guns and some of my SJC Glocks that I have. And I don't know, I probably got 10 KKM barrels and other guns. I said, you know what, let me send it to the professional and the specialist and see what's going on. And sure enough, there was a fit issue going on with the gun. I won't get into the intimate details, but high level, Luke put in a new barrel for me, a KKM barrel, and man, that thing is, I feel like a bullseye shooter now.
Nice.
Yeah, the barrel makes me a better shooter, I can tell you that already. So,
well, you know, most times when you're missing, everybody wants to think it's the gun. It's usually the nut behind the trigger.
It actually was the gun, Jeff.
In this case, it was the gun.
This one time. So, you know, so I got it back after the West Florida match, and so I put some rounds down range on Monday. I was giddy like a little schoolgirl, and then took a little bit of time off, and then the Chris Barrett came over to do some training, and we shot, I don't know, 3 different stages. We shot Accelerator, and then Showdown, and then we shot a little Outer Limits, and I posted my best video because, hey, there wasn't so many good best videos out there on Outer Limits, so I had to throw one up there so I could go back to it, make me feel good about myself. But, yeah, Outer Limits is one. When I published my classifications here this past week, you know, it's the first classification that I've had under 60 seconds. So I guess if I shot all those personal bests, I could shoot a sub sub 60. And when I was looking at my times, because I did make a plan after World Speed Shoot of, hey, how am I going to get to below 60? What do I need to do on each stage to get below 60? And Outer Limits was sticking out there. And I think one of the issues with that, Jeff, is we don't really shoot it that much at our local match. And
Agreed.
So, yeah, and that's cool. That's no excuse, though. But, I think I've shot it maybe sub 10 once. It was at a local match north of Atlanta, but they didn't turn in the scores at the time. They weren't affiliated. But outside of that, I think I'm sitting at like a 1040 something, which, the fastest people in the world, I'm not saying it's slow, but it's not going to be in the top 3. So I need to need a plan to get to sub 10, which is 3.33 seconds on each string. And I think I've got it figured out. Now I just got to do it consistently, which, the last 10 strings that I shot, I think I had one mic out of, 9 of the 10, or I'm sorry, 1 of the 10. So I had 9 good ones. So that's the level of consistency that I'm looking for. So we'll see. But maybe I need to opt for some more salads instead of a steak now and then, and maybe I'll get to one from one box to another. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit, though.
Well, let's talk about Outer Limits for our listeners. I personally love the stage. Having started this game in the USPSA and having to do the movement, I really love the challenge of that stage. And I love the intricacies of it, and I've done the math. Every other stage has 24 ways to shoot it. Now, most of them aren't viable. You're not going to shoot 1, 4, 2, 3, stop, and smoke and hope.
Right.
You throw that out. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, I shoot it 3, 4, 1, 2, stop. Those are all viable methods. And even, people say, well, there's only one way to shoot 5 to go, but we've both seen some people shoot it 4, 3, 2, 1, stop, and put up some serious speed. But when you look at Outer Limits, there's only 4 ways to shoot the stage. You're either going to go 1, 2, and then you're going to move and go, for sake of argument, 3, 4, stop, or you're going to go 1, 2, and then move and go 4, 3, stop.
Right.
Or 2, 1, and then move, and of course the other 2 on that side. So there's only 4 ways to shoot it. And quite frankly, I've seen a lot of good shooters, and I've seen all 4 methods shot well. So when people say to me, what's the best way to shoot that stage? My first answer is, what do you feel comfortable with? How do you like to move? Do you like to shoot left to right? Do you like to shoot right to left? That 12-inch plate at I think it's 20 yards, plate 1, quite frankly, looks to be about the same size as that 18 by 24. It's at 35.
Oh, yeah, it certainly does.
So visually, you're not, changing it. And if you think about, I do this with a lot of people that I train. I have them point their gun, get it all sighted in. Works well with iron sights, but it also works with dots. Sight it all in, and then I move the gun just a little. And I say, is the gun on target? And they go, no. I said, it doesn't take much to miss. And your margin of error is a lot less, even though it's a bigger plate, it's 35 yards away. So we're talking about orders. How do you like to shoot Outer Limits?
I'll tell you that. I was just thinking while you're saying, you said, oh, man, that's a 12-inch plate, plate 1. I'm sitting here thinking, man, I think that thing's like an 8-inch plate. How far out it is. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. No, it is a 12-inch plate, but being out that far, well, let me go to the order here in just a second. One of the common things that I think we all need to be careful of when we're shooting a stage such as Outer Limits, same thing happens with speed option, is you've got to be careful on how you sight in your gun. That's why we recommend 18 to 20 yards or so.
Agreed.
What a lot of people don't really understand is that the bullet, specifically a 22, is actually climbing, coming out of the muzzle just a little bit. And so if you have your gun sighted in at maybe 10 yards and it's dead center, and then you throw one out to 35 yards, it'll be on the top third of the plate, and that's natural. So you just need to understand where your bullet trajectory is and sight in appropriately. And that's one of the common issues that I find when I'm training folks, whether it's on a stage like Speed Option or Showdown or, Outer Limits with some back targets. So here's what I do, Jeff, for lack of, I don't know, it's just one of those things, the way that I've always shot it, and I've tried it a couple different ways, but the way that I first started shooting it is 1-2, go into the next box, 4-3, stop. And so I'm coming in, I'm shooting the little plate, then the big plate, then coming into the next box, shooting the little plate, big plate, and then the stop. And for whatever reason, the reason why I choose to do it that way is I do think shot number 1 is a little bit tougher than shot number 2. And there's something in my training that goes back years and years, said, hey, you know what? You always want to draw on one of the toughest targets. So if you have an array and you select one of the toughest first when you're doing your quote-unquote draw, sometimes you want to make sure you got a good string started off on a good first shot. So I always throw one on that one, and then the second one I'm careful, but I don't neglect it. Then when I'm coming in the next box, I treat the array backwards. But as soon as I get in that next box, I need to make sure that my dot is on that fourth plate, that round 12-inch plate. And then where I make up a little bit of my speed is how fast I transition the gun, shoot those last couple shots coming into the stop plate. Those last 2 shots are probably 2 of the quickest shots that I have in Steel Challenge. And I do that intentionally to compensate for my lack of speed from going one box to another.
I shoot it the same way, and for very similar reasons. One of them was 2 years ago when I went to U.S. Steel, which was my first big match ever. I'd only ever shot the stage once before. And I talked to Shannon Smith, and I said, how do I shoot this? How do I move? And he told me, and that's the way I've always done it. So I've never, and again, we can't shoot that at the WAC, so I don't get a chance to really practice it any other way, and I stick with what I know. A couple of the reasons as I've gone through the years and breaking it down for me is, for a right-handed shooter, your movement is going to go left to right. And coming up on plate 2 and then transitioning back to 1, you're actually moving the gun in the opposite direction of the way you're moving.
Great point. You're exactly right.
And so I like to, same kind of thing, come up, ensure that shot, and plate 2 is definitely a shot that I will call. If the dot's on the plate, I'm pulling the trigger and I'm moving, and I'm not waiting for any listening or anything. And if I end up doing the steel dance, I end up doing the steel dance. But
yeah, Jeff, I'm not sure if I know exactly what you're talking about. Could you video for that for the audience, and we'll post it up on the Facebook page?
Yes, and for those that have shot with me, I've also done the steel slide. The North Florida Championships, I actually crappy sneakers, wet grass, and I went down, but that muzzle stayed forward, and I got up and finished the stage.
In all seriousness, I think we talked about that maybe once before. I was at that match, and the grass was probably like 8 or 10 inches the day before. It was freshly cut grass, literally the day before, and it rained at night. I mean, that was probably the trickiest stage of Outer Limits I've ever seen set up any place across the country. It was pretty dicey, even with footwear that had like some sort of traction on it. That was pretty tough.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I've also watched a lot of good shooters. After you've released the shot for plate 2,
yep,
for your rifle, what are you doing with it? Are you keeping it shouldered? Are you dropping it? Explain to our listeners how you attack this stage.
Well, I think that's a great question, Jeff, because this past weekend I was trying some different things because, like I said, I think I need to be in that 950 range, and so I was pushing it pretty darn hard. You know, I get that great first shot, and then I'm pulling up and calling the shot on the second one. And I'll share this little tidbit with you in conjunction with your question about what I do with the rifle. What I'm having to do is I'm actually starting to move as the gun's coming up on the second plate. It's a little bit it's risky, but when, you know, compared to Chris Barrett, I think he shot like a 960 at the World Speed Shoot, and at Georgia, I think he shot a 940, and I think in PCCI he may have the new world record. So he's shooting this thing in the mid nines. And anyway, to catch up to Chris on a stage like that where he's got a distinct athletic advantage to me, because I think he's like 6'8", and the guy weighs 130 pounds soaking wet with six pack under each arm, but he's not old enough to drink yet, so that's another story. Mountain Dew, that's right, Mountain Dew. He goes from, I mean, I've got video of it, from him going from one box to another. I mean, it's completely effortless. The kid moves so fast, it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And so we were timing his transition time, and I would say on average he's probably in that 1.6 to 1.68. Sometimes when he's pushing it pretty aggressively, he's in the 1.5. What I mean by that, from the second shot to the third shot, that's the time that we're measuring on the timer. And, you know, hey, I'm shooting one, then shooting the other, and then I'm moving, and I'm very deliberate. Oh man, I'm 2 seconds, and you know that's costing me a full second on the stage. So what I've done is, you know, I'm getting a good sight picture on the first one. I think my first shot time's probably 0.5354, maybe up to a 0.6 if I'm pretty calculated. And then that second shot's pretty darn quick. It's maybe a split of a 0.3, 0.33. That's kind of where I'm at right now. So the first two shots are going off sub 1 second. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling up on that second shot, and my momentum's already starting to go a little bit towards that second box, and I'm calling that baby, and maybe even 1 foot slightly just bringing up my right foot. And again, that's how I'm trying to shoot this thing at 950. And then I keep the gun shouldered. I launch out. I do not reposition my feet. And I talked to a very, very good shooter here. I don't know, it's probably 8 months ago. I won't tell you who he is, Ron Flowers. But we were at a match over in North Carolina, and, you know, I was working on his rifles, and Ryan's a fantastic shooter. And I was talking to his dad, and I said, hey, I'm not going to bother him while he's shooting, but, you know, watch his feet. And so what he was doing like a shuffle step inside the first box, going over to the next box. I told him, I said, take a video of that and show it to him when he gets home, because that's costing him probably a 0.2 or 0.3 seconds, because footwork is everything. You got to come out your right foot, left foot, then right foot in the box, and then your left foot into the box. But I'm keeping the gun shouldered for a rifle, and then I've got the gun not completely lined up with plate number 4, but it's right there, and I accelerate as hard as I can coming out of that first box, and I'm trying to soften my step into the shooting position, because if I go in too hard, the rifle's all over the place. And so what I do is I'm right off of that plate, and so I just get the barrel just under the plate, bring it up, see it, and then I transition hard coming through. And I noticed one thing. Cole Bush used to shoulder the gun. He used to take it down and lift it up, kind of like what a lot of people do shooting PCC and USPSA. The last match that I saw him shoot, I saw him not do that. So it would be interesting to talk to him why he changed. But keeping the gun up on the shoulder in that situation, I don't think I can move any quicker just because you're taking 2 steps. And by the time, with my lack of coordination, getting the gun back up where it should be may take actually a little bit extra time.
I agree. And you know, you're talking about where tenths of a second or even less matter. It's wasted movement, wasted time, and the gun's moving around too much. When I first started shooting this, I actually tried to target plate 4 as I was moving. And I realized that I was trying to do too much, and I was moving slower than I could have by trying to maintain a sight picture on that plate. So I do the same thing. I do drop the gun just out of my sight picture. So I actually lose the dot, if you will, moving when I'm moving. but the gun stays shoulder, and then it's almost like a mini draw stroke back up to 4. Now, are you keeping the dot in your field of vision, or are you dropping it out?
On 4 or on?
Yeah, when you're transitioning from the boxes and I'm assuming you're still shooting plate 4 as your first shot when you're in the middle box.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit briefly about the video. I think it's got like 1,800 views and whatnot from this past weekend with Chris and I on an accelerator. Let me explain that a little bit, and I'll kind of get back into outer limits here.
Okay.
So one of the things that I noticed a while ago, and Chris Barron and I have talked about it, and this isn't the first time we've talked about it. First time we talked about it was probably 8 months ago, and then 6 months ago, 3 months ago, and then we talked about it this weekend. He's shooting accelerator probably in the mid 1.6s, maybe 1.75, and when he goes 110%, 120%, where he really lights them up, the kid's shooting it at 1.35, but the likelihood he's connecting on all those is maybe once in a while. But what's happening is he's seeing the dot on every single target. I do as well. I always see on accelerator, I always see the dot on every single target. But what's happening is if he can get 4 good ones, maybe, between that 165 and heck, anything under 2 seconds is still considered really good. And he opens one up and just happens to connect on one of those 3.5s or 1.4s or somewhere in there. That takes his total time down about, between 0.3 and half a second.
Yep.
That's why he can shoot it. And I'd have to look to see what his fastest time. I think mine's in the 7s. His maybe mid-7s. I think Grant's probably mid-7s. Cole Bush, I think, is 740, 750, somewhere in there. But that's one way of going about it. But what we were talking about on the video that, some people are like, oh, man, that's crazy. Well, that's not the way I was taught shooting USPSA, and that's not the way I was taught. And okay, but with a rimfire gun, PCC or rimfire rifle open, and I've tried it all, Jeff, trust me, it's I think you got to be a student of the game to get better and understand what your splits are, your first shot time, and where you need to make up time and all that kind of stuff. But the concept that we were talking about is most people are taught to cut your eyes, meaning this: you pull up on an accelerator on the first plate, drop your gun, keep your eyes on the plate. When the timer goes off, you pull the gun up, and the dot should be square in the middle of the target. You pull the trigger and go. And in the cut your eyes scenario, plate 2 is the big 18 by 24 there, is to get your eyes there, and then once the gun gets there, you pull the trigger. So your eyes are leaving the center of the optic, and then you transition your eyes to plate number 4 and then come back through. But what Chris and I have been working on, and I think it's helped both of us on different stages, is that in some of these faster stages, and I'll get back to outer limits here in a second, on some of these faster stages, we're keeping our eyes inside of the dot itself, inside the optic itself. So outside of the first shot, on the first shot, I'm looking at the plate, and as soon as I see the red dot clear as day on the first target, I'm squeezing the trigger. And then as soon as, and it's very tough to do, Jeff, I swear to God, sometimes it's like, would you keep your eyes inside the optic? And then I see every single shot, but it's kind of like one of those first shooter games on PlayStation. That's the best way I can say to explain it, is once the little zombie gets inside, or the rectangle or the circle gets inside you keep it inside the optic. But once it comes into sight, you see the red on the target, you squeeze the trigger. And something very interestingly happens, and Chris and I were talking a little bit about it this past weekend. He was shooting them, in that 165, 1.7 range, and I was as well. It feels like you're shooting slow. It's like, oh man, I feel like I saw everything and this and that, and it's like that should be a 2-second run, and it's like a 1.6 or a 1.7 or a 1.8. And it's interesting. There's some feedback out on Facebook and on the post about it. It's like, well, I wasn't taught that way. That's not a one size fits all. And I'll say the same thing. I do the same exact thing on Smoke and Hope. When I set the world record here in Rimfire Rifle Open, I saw the dot on every single plate. And what happens is you lose that sense of panic. And I know you've seen it because I've had it as well. It's like, it's a G-rated show. That was close. But I I got to move the gun quicker. I got to shoot faster because the timer's not saying I'm shooting fast. And it's like, well, if you just see everything, and you got to see it quickly, but you see everything when you need to see it and pull the trigger, it's, good results and things go fast. So I tell you that to tell you this, that on outer limits, I raise the gun up, point it right at plate number 1, drop the gun down, timer goes up. It comes up, and I follow the optic on the second plate. I see the dot, I squeeze the trigger, and I'm booking. And at that point in time, my head is leaving the gun or the sight, if you will. And then it's like the same thing that's happening on plate number 4, same thing that happened on plate number 1. I bring the gun up just down, and that's why I do it, bring it just from underneath it because I'm used to seeing it that way. As soon as I see the red on the target, and then I follow the dot into the last 2 shots.
Okay, so
that's why they're so quick.
And that's what I do as well, and that's what's been working for me. And I actually got it when I saw Cole shooting. I watched Cole very specifically, and what I saw was just that same thing. That gun was shouldered, and he was dropping it out of his sight. So his head, he was moving, and he wasn't looking down. And that's something that I want to point out to everybody too. It's not wrong to look down, but it's going to be faster if you just know you can make it there. And I don't know what you do. I personally put 2 blue strips of the painter's tape 6 foot apart, and one day just practiced what that movement felt like. And I try not to look down anymore because, again, to me, it's wasted movement. If I can keep my eye on that plate number 4, the gun just out of view, know that I'm going to get there, and as soon as that left foot hits, and that left foot either just makes it inside the shooting box in the middle, or sometimes comes down right on top of it, but as soon as that foot hits, I'm ready to break the shot.
And I think the thing we got to be careful of, Jeff, and I'm not being critical, but at the World Speed Shoot this year, I don't know the size of the box themselves. I don't know if it was a 2-inch box or if it was 1.25 inches or something like that. But you got to be mindful when you're shooting outer limits, because
Agreed.
one of the worst things you can have happen is go down on a stage like that. And we talked a little bit about you, but it is extremely seriously. As soon as you go into a falling motion, you got to make sure your finger's outside the trigger, and you should be doing that anyway. In outer limits, going from one box to another. But what happened at the World Speed Shoot is people were digging their foot in. So at one point in time, there was like a 4-inch, it was almost like a 4-inch deep box that you're shooting out of, and a really popular shooter that we won't mention, I almost did, but got DQ'd because they fell coming out of that box in outer limits. And so that's probably the only exception. If you know that you're in a situation where, you practice on something that may be 1 inch in height, and then you're in a situation you're 2, 3, 4 inches deep, that's what happened to me. I peeked down because I sure, I was having a pretty good match, and I wasn't going to waste it all on, making sure I didn't get my silly foot out of the box. But you just got to be careful in those types of conditions.
Well, again, I think you raise a good point there, in that every range is different. I know when I shot the match at at Griffin. Okay.
Yep.
The outside of the box, the gravel had actually rolled up, and it was almost a mound.
Yeah.
And I actually asked the RO, I said, if my foot's on the box, but I'm touching that, is that going to be considered a procedural? And this is something everybody's got to think about, because, of course, if you don't make it into the box, if you're touching outside, and even if you're standing on the box, the way the rules are written, if you're standing on the box, but a part of your foot is touching outside, that's a procedural.
Right.
And so you raise a good point, is that you've got to look at every range, every stage, and how you're going to attack that. Some people use the
And
the one
I think
inch
that's a great
PVC.
point, Jeff, because in that video that I posted, I don't know if it was yesterday or something like that, it was, you know, at the end of the training session, I said, let's do this. And I made fun of Chris Baird a little bit. Love you, Chris, like a brother, because there was a couple times he was, you know, because when you're practicing, sometimes you got to push it and see how fast you can go before you fall off the edge. And my man, Chris, he found it, and he started shooting the last 3 shots in the center box on 1 foot. I mean, it was kind of all over the place, and a little pray and spray, and I think he may have killed a woodland creature out behind the berm. Don't tell him I said that. But you know, but anyway, he had some rocking fast times, you know. I'm not sure if he connected doing that once, and so the video that we took, you know, his dad Jeff, he volunteered to take a couple of videos, and that last one I was like, all right, I'm gonna open one up here. And so on that second shot, my body is moved over probably about 8 inches or so when the second shot breaks. My foot's just coming up. But even if that foot is in the air and it's out in the middle while that shot's going off, as long as I'm not touching the ground with my right foot,
Correct.
it's a non-issue. And then into the shooter's box, as long as my right foot's down and my left foot is in the air, I can shoot the last whatever shots. Just happened to be the last, I don't know, maybe it was the first 2 out of the last 3. My left foot was up in the air, and, you know, it hit, and I caught a 289. I was like, man, I wish I could bottle that. But, you know, it's you just got to be careful of those types of things, because you can ruin a pretty good run by discharging around outside of the box like that.
Well, you know, you raised a couple of good points here that I want to step back on, and early on, you know, and one of the first videos I ever watched was a great video put out by Trenton Mitsuoka on shooting the outer limits, and where he talks about your most aggressive move is your first step.
Yep, coming out of the box.
And then everything else, you're actually slowing down and smoothing. Now, didn't say go slow. I said slowing down. Because if you get into the box and then have to settle, that's time wasted.
Yeah, we talk
in the box.
Yeah, to describe that to a shooter, when we talk about settle, it means being able to get the gun in the sight on that target by the time you get into that box. Because that time when you're actually inside the box to trying to get that dot or front sight on that target, that's how long, when Jeff's talking about settling, that's how long that it takes. But you cannot shoot those last 3 shots aggressively, and, you know, from the back plate to the stop plate, if you don't have the dot on that front sight, or on that plate number 4 in the example that we're using. Because if you're kind of all over the place on that one, you're going to probably take a little bit extra time to settle on the back plate before you hit the stop plate pretty hard. And so it's very important to hit that plate 4, again, in the order that we're talking about, to hit that plate 4 under control. Like I shared a little bit ago, you know, that's where I make up a little time on some of the best shooters out there, is my transition coming off of that plate number 4. I'm trying to make up for my inability to get from one box to another as quick as somebody like, you know, fill in the blank, you know, Mackenzie or Cole or Grant or Chris or Colby, or I don't know. It seemed like a long list there, Jeff.
Yeah, but they're all under 20. It doesn't count.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The other point is you were talking about footwork. And I've had a number of people ask me, you know, should I cross my feet? You know, how should I move? And I think a lot of different people, it's a lot of different styles. I don't cross my feet. I take that first big step with my right foot, and my left foot comes to it, and then I take another step, and I'm in the box.
Right.
I don't like crossing my feet because to me, it's too much twisting motion that isn't helping me get prepared to break a shot on plate 4. The other thing that I've noticed, and I've done this a lot, and I had a great guy, older shooter, Dwayne Collins, but he's a wealth of information. And I used to end in the second box with my left foot, and I would shoot on my toe. So my right foot would be flat foot, and my left foot would be, I would just be on my toe.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are you doing that? And I said, well, it's faster. He's like, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
And you're not as stable on your toe.
You're exactly right. That's exactly what I was going to say, Jeff, because I've seen quite a few good shooters do that. And, it may work out sometimes, but the lack of stability, again, if you're driving, pushing the gun pretty hard like I am, yeah, you may shoot that fifth shot and you're falling out of the box again, but just got to be careful with that.
Yep, I agree. Now, do you do it any different? I mean, again, you're a fantastic rifle shooter and a very good pistol shooter, but do you do it much different when you're shooting pistols, either rimfire or centerfire?
Let's stay on talk a little bit about the rimfire side of things. The centerfire I can talk to in theory. It's just one of those things.
Okay.
I was talking to a couple of people this past weekend about centerfire, and I love to shoot it, but it's one of those things that, I may shoot handgun centerfire, maybe only 5,000 rounds a year, 7,000 rounds a year. I'll shoot 20,000 through my PCC, and I'll shoot another 50, 60, 70,000 in rimfire. So I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like, what do you really want to be good at? And, maybe one of these times I'll just say, hey, because I love shooting open. I love shooting my 1911, love shooting carry optics, and love shooting revolver. You know what? I love shooting it all, Jeff. I guess is what I'm coming down to.
I'm with you, brother. I'm with you.
But in order to stay as one of the, the best rimfire, specifically rimfire rifle and PCC open shooters and what I think in the country, you got to kind of stay with it and practice it,
Sure.
And so that's where that's where I feel like I am, and that's where I want to stay. And so it's tough to give that up, and I've focused a little bit more on the iron sight guns here lately.
Right.
But
I have a next question that I think a lot of our listeners would like to hear your take on it.
Okay.
And that is your start position. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now those plates are 20 yards and 35 yards away from the front of the box.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And we have to move. If you're a right-handed shooter, you're moving right to left. So I know where I like to stand, but why don't you tell people where you like to stand?
All right. So I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to go back to the other question.
Okay, yeah.
So I like to stand in, it's one of those things that I'm 5 foot, let's say 5'9.5", but I'm 5 foot nothing. So disproportionately, people are going to start looking at me weird now. But from my waist to my head is a lot longer than the waist to my toe. So I've got short legs. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate that. So what happens is on the first shot in the first box, I actually almost have my feet completely together, maybe slightly apart. If they're apart, they're not more than a couple inches apart, which is not stable compared to all the other stages that I'm shooting fast at. So I've learned to compensate for that a little bit. But I stand probably in the a third from the back of the box because I've got a natural motion when I'm coming out with my right foot left and then right. I end up moving forward about 4 to 6 inches. And so if I stand in the front of the box and I made that transition and, closing my eyes, I'd be standing or just outside the front of the box. And so I always try to get towards a little bit back in the box, but not too far back for those two reasons. But I'm right all the way up against the right side. Shooting with Chris, he puts his right foot right on the side of the box itself, and I haven't done that yet, but maybe that will help just a little bit.
That's about where I stand too, and I've showed a lot of people this is that, and you pointed out, even if you closed your eyes, you're going to move forward. Most people, when they move laterally, also move forward.
Right.
It's not a natural motion to move laterally and move backward.
Right.
So I've seen some people where they're actually standing in the front of the box. And let's face it, the box is it's a 4-foot box. So is there really a difference between 20 or 21 yards, 1 foot? And it's not even that. Is that really going to make a difference? 35 yards, 36 yards? That distance is irrelevant.
Right.
But when you talk about having to add the movement aspect of it, And again, not having to look down, knowing you're going to get there. I'm with you. I actually stand pretty much in the back right corner of the first box, and so I can make that bursting move, and I end up about in the middle of the box. So I'm actually going at an angle.
Yeah.
And now you wanted to go back to an earlier question, so let's do that, because then I got another one that I think people want to hear.
Okay, so back to the pistol conversation, whether it's rimfire pistol or if it's open gun or 1911 or what have you, any pistol, I do treat it just a little bit differently. My start position's the same, my first shot's the same, but as soon as I break that second shot, I actually bring the gun in and I lean a little bit when I'm moving from box to box, and then just as I'm entering in, I put my right foot in there, and as my left foot's coming in the box, I punch the gun out so it's right on target. So I'm seeing the sight as it's hitting the target, and then I shoot it. And the reason why I do that, Jeff, is data. I mean, I've taken video of myself doing it, and I've tried it different ways. And, how am I going to shoot a 350 with my rimfire pistol open gun? And, because I was stuck in that 380 range. And what I've found is I fluctuated between, .2 to 0.27 seconds faster doing it that way compared to hanging the gun out. And I think what it came down to, because I'm not as good of a pistol shooter as I'm a rifle shooter, I think it's a little bit of stability or lack of stability getting in that second box. And I tried actually slowing down, and it was slow. So I remember talking with, I think it was Max or maybe it was Dave. Those guys were bringing in the gun as they were moving. And so it ended up shaving some precious time. Almost saved me a second on the whole stage.
I'm going to put a shameless plug in here. First of all, I agree with you completely. And I think part of it is that just don't even have a gun in your hand. And if you've got your hands fully outstretched in your position, try to move, as opposed to moving with your arms in. It just feels more natural, okay? But what you did was you tested it. And I know you've got the new house and you've got the home range, yada, yada, yada. But I know you did this before you had the home range.
Right.
I'm assuming you did the testing. So you got to a range, you were able to do some stuff. And this is something I want to point out to people. And here's where the shameless plug comes in for the Amg Labs Timer. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
This timer, and all timers give you splits, but this timer will actually put the splits into a pad if you've got it Bluetooth connected, and you can go back and evaluate that. So you can understand, what was my first shot? What was my transitional shot? Did I take 6, 5, 7 shots? And if on those strings of 5, what was my time between shot 2 and shot 3? And because that's your move, that's basically the time it's taking to move and reacquire the target. But you tested it, you evaluated it. You didn't just say, this is what I know, this is what I've heard, this is what I should do. And I think more people need to try to do that. Just because Steve says something or I say something. I mean, we've both, Steve more accomplished than I, but I've had some pretty good accomplishments. We're still learning. We're always learning. And everything we say may not work for you. I've got a good friend, and I was trying to teach him something, and then I finally realized he's left eye dominant.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that changes some things with how they're holding the gun and how they're standing. So everything doesn't work for everybody. But again, the whole goal is to find the things that work for you the best, to give you the best string times, to then give you the best stage times. And that's always at that time. Because I know over years, Steve, we talked 2 years ago, and we were talking about the JPs, and you were like, yeah, I really love my JP. I like a heavy gun. And now you're shooting one of the lightest guns out there on the market.
It brings a smile to my face. Hey, I'll tell you a quick story about that, Jeff. I'm working for the same company, but in a different location. It's over by Peachtree City in Georgia, which is a very, very nice place, in case you've ever been. But there's a pub kind of restaurant kind of thing, right next to a gun range. I know, I'm like, glorious, finally. So I had lunch there, and then I started walking through the store, not doing any shopping or anything, just, seeing what was going on.
Browsing. You were browsing.
Yeah. And I won't shame the brand, but I said, man, you got any PCCs in here? He's like, oh, yeah, you mean 9mm? Yeah, of course. Pistol caliber carbine. He said, oh, yeah, I got one of those. And, again, I'm not going to say the name, although it's very difficult to. I think it was SBR. It may have had a 10-inch barrel. It could have been slightly under that. I said, oh, let me fondle that thing for you. And so he gave me the gun, and I picked it up. I swung, and I went, oh, my God, this thing's heavy.
And it was
that crazy. Yeah. And the handguard was probably no more than 7, 8, 9 inches, somewhere in there. And my handguard on my JP is like 12 inches, and the barrel's that 16-inch sleeve gun. And it was remarkable, the difference between both of them. I was like, oh, my goodness. Yeah, the JP, it's and I'll tell you a little bit more about it because this weekend, Chris Barrett, he's been chasing breaking 60. He shot a 60-point something with his PCC over at CMP with his PCC. Yep, you heard me, PCC. And, we're talking about the pros and cons. He's got a 12-inch handguard because we spec his gun out based on my gun, and so we went with a 14.5-inch pin barrel, which is still very, very nice. It's a little bit heavier than mine, but a lot lighter than the 16-inch with the comp on it, with the 15-inch handguard. And we're, the course of the 3 stages that we shot, he was able to shoot some stages better and some stages not quite as fast with my gun as with his gun. And that's the pro and con to it. Fast stages like Smoke and Hope, my gun's going to be faster than his all day long. But stages, even like Accelerator, where you're pushing the gun extremely hard, his gun felt a little bit more in control because there's a little bit more weight out there. And I think 5 to go is the same. I think Pendulum's the same. But even stages like Showdown, my gun's faster than his.
Roundabout, I'm sure yours,
Yeah, it's the same thing. But, you're talking 0.15, maybe a string or something like that. But there's that balance between stability. So I think that you got to find what's right for you. Unfortunately, you can't just go to, well, maybe you can go to JP and shoot some stuff and, find what gun fits for you. But overall, friends of the podcast, Lori O'Rear, she was down in Florida and she was trying a bunch of different guns and she ended up shooting my JP. And it's the thing that JP has perfected when you get the JP guys back on here is that SCS, that silent capture system.
Yes.
It's important if you get the short stroke, which is the 5 weight, or the regular stroke, which is the 4 weight, is you tune the weights to the load of your gun, or you tune the load to your overall system. So I was talking with somebody over Facebook 2 days ago about, this gun's beating me up and blah, blah, blah. And they had the JP buffer in it. And I said, well, what loads you run? Oh, it's 124 grain going 950, feet per second. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. It's beat the, what out of you, because you got 3 stainless on there and 2 tungsten. Throw 2 more tungsten on there, or even 3 more tungsten. That baby's going to shoot like a dream. And other systems aren't as adjustable. And, there was another brand, again, I'm not going to get in brand shaming, but that they shot, and it's like you have that spring going next to your head, which is so distracting. It's just I can't believe people put stuff on the market like that, but it drives you crazy. But that's one of the reasons why I shoot the JP stuff. And I'm not sitting here saying that everybody's got money to fork over $2,000 on your gun, but I do have a discount code for 5% off if you need it. But anyway, it's it's different equipment. Same thing with the rimfire rifle open gun. It's a little bit lighter, it's faster on transitions. You just got to hold the gun and pull it in a little bit more on some of the more tougher shots, so it's not moving around on you as much.
Well, so 2 points, and then I'll stop asking my questions because I think this has been a really good session. And you just alluded to, and that was gripping the gun.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this is a mistake a lot of people make, specifically for those that shoot PCC and also shoot rimfire rifle, which is most everybody that shoots PCC shoots a rimfire rifle, and if you start rimfire rifle, you end up wanting to get a PCC. And I've had a lot of people ask me,
Jeff, it's really a natural progression.
It is.
All right, go ahead.
But I've had a lot of people say, I shoot my PCC better than I shoot my rimfire rifle. And I go, do you want me to tell you why? And they went, yeah. I said, because you don't respect the 22. You don't respect the rimfire.
Yep.
I said, you say to yourself, oh, it's a rimfire gun. There's not as much recoil, and you don't grip the gun like you grip the PCC.
Right.
And I tell everybody, I said, when you come off a stage, 5 strings, and you're putting that gun back in the bag or on your cart, if it doesn't feel like it's still in your shoulder, and I'm not talking about pain, but if you don't still have a little bit of a feel of it being in your shoulder, you weren't gripping the gun hard enough.
Yeah.
And when you suddenly start getting people to realize, if I really grip that gun in there, that dot, or if you're shooting iron sights, that sight picture doesn't move.
Yep.
And when it doesn't move, it sure makes it a lot more fun to shoot, because then you're not hunting and pecking for that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But let's jump back to the last point I want to ask you about on outer limits, and that is your ending position. Now, I know the answer to this. I know what I do, but I want you to express to the people what you feel. So my guess is that your starting position, you said your feet are just slightly apart, but you're mostly erect, straight up and down. You're not in any kind of crouching position, are you?
No, I try not to be.
Right. But as you're moving, you can't help. Your knees are going to bend. You're going to get into a crouched position when you're moving.
Yep.
How do you end up in the middle box?
Well, I think where you're going is that when you're transitioning from one box to another, you get low just a little bit to keep, to kind of scoot across, and that's the way that I do it. I try to stay low but yet a little bit vertical, and I try to keep the weight more on the balls of my feet, not on the heels of my feet.
Yep.
So try to be as much complete control as I can, and I'm just a tad bit lower. The issue that I see, what happens with some people as they shoot their last 3 shots, and I can take a video of the next person I see do it, probably at the next Steel Challenge match that I go to, is people actually stand up.
Bingo.
as they
shoot. What I wanted you to say.
Yeah, they stand up as they shoot the last 3 shots, and it's kind of like when you shot basketball when you're a kid, or maybe you still play basketball today. It's always easier shooting a free throw than it is a jump shot, because you got this perception that the backboard's actually moving when you're jumping up the air when you're shooting a ball like that. And the free throw, easy for me to say tonight, is a stationary shot. And that's what happens when you're going in from one box to another, is if you can stay as constant, not too far forward, and still rotate. Remember, rotate your body specifically at your hips, and try to move at your knees, and keep your upper torso kind of locked in position. It's easier to shoot it that way than coming up on the gun, and sometimes that can really hurt you when you're shooting an iron sight gun. You may end up doing what I call the prairie dog, where you're looking over the front of the sight, looking at the target, and what happens is the front sight goes up and the back stays the same, and then you start shooting over the top of the targets.
Yep.
And somebody Jeff just went, oh my God, that's what I do. He knows me.
He's been there. He's bought every T-shirt, all the socks. He's got them all. He could wear the wardrobe of all the issues you've all been through.
Oh, there's not too many I haven't done or seen, that's for sure.
No, but I'm glad. I mean, I knew the answer, and I knew the answer you were going to give, and you can see it with some people. It's very apparent where they'll actually get into almost a low crouch as they're moving. And I'm not saying that's bad, but don't stand up. You're taking at least a quarter of a second to do that.
Oh, yeah.
To stand back up. And now what you're also doing is you're already adding lateral movement, and now you're adding vertical movement.
Right.
That isn't doing you any good. And it's something that, virtually everybody before their stage, they say, hey, can I take a movement, sometimes without the gun, usually without the gun, because they're down there painting, so you're practicing a couple. And just as you're doing that, shooters, think about it. and just test yourself. And as you move, go, oh my God, I just stood up. Why did I stand up? I don't need to stand up. And, you may find yourself saving that 0.2, 0.25 per string. 0.25 per string is 0.75. That's huge in outer limits for anybody at any level. So,
Jeff, I'm really self-conscious right now. I'm watching the video that I posted the other day about me shooting that 289 on outer limits, and I did not stand up, which is a good thing. I was just waiting for, Steve, you said you did do, but I saw a video saying you did. Yeah, that's kind of funny.
Well, it's funny because we do have a lot of listeners. I was checking it, and everybody out there, I just want to say thank you. Most of our podcasts end up breaking 500 listeners through all the different places that we send them out through. And I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you listening to Steve and I. We love doing this. It's fun for us. And contrary to popular belief, we don't get paid. This is a labor of love. In fact, it's cost us both money because we've bought microphones, so we sound a little better. But I just want to say thanks again. We should say that every episode, but I want to clearly say that on this one.
Yeah, I echo those comments, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I know it was most recently down the West Florida Steel Challenge Championship match at your club. I think I had 7 or 8 people come up and talk to me and thank me for doing the podcast and whatnot. And it was crazy. Some of the questions. Yeah, remember back on this episode when you talked about yeah. No, it was really cool to talk to some of the folks that listen to the podcast. It's very humbling, and having that type of positive feedback makes me want to get back on the microphone again to chat about what's going on in the shooting world and Steel Challenge, specifically a little Rimfire Challenge, a little USPSA. And, we've been very humbled by the guests that we've had, everybody from, Larry Joe Steely Jr., Steel Target Paint, to Brian at Hunter's HD Gold, to Mike Foley, El Prez. I mean, there's just, whenever we've asked somebody in the industry, and we've got a list of some folks that we're going to have on soon, but, I haven't had a single person and I'm not doing that. So it's pretty cool. Oh, yeah, you guys are doing the podcast, folks that we don't have a relationship with, and maybe the timer guy, we'll find out, Jeff. But it's very humbling to get the feedback that we've had, and to have so many people that want to hear what we say is pretty darn cool.
Well, he was Alex is a friend on Facebook, and he listens to it, and he actually reposted our last episode because we talked about the timer and its abilities, and so he's listening. So yeah, maybe we can get him on here and talk about the what, why, and how, and all that about that timer, because right now, to me, it's the best one on the market for what it does. I mean, other timers can do some other things. The CED timer, not afraid to call them out. It's a great timer. If you get one with the RF chip, you can actually have it go to the big board, which is kind of cool. But when you look at the whole package, what the AMG does, the Bluetooth to the device, I mean, we ran that entire West Florida match with those timers, and the person on the pad hit a button.
And what's cool about the timer, because I think I sold one this weekend, is looking at the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth shot. If you're unfortunately getting into that, I haven't seen if it goes out to like 10.
When you're shooting single stack, right?
Yeah, maybe. All I got.
Or your KKM barrel when you're shooting single stack.
Reload. Yeah, one of the coolest things that that I was talking to Chris about is like, look, if you're you need to burn this stuff consciously into your subconscious when you're shooting. And the last 3 strings I shot before that 289 were getting all crazy and stuff. On the first 2 shots, because I was trying to be consistent, because I'm trying to push that second shot as I'm moving a little bit, the margin of difference between my first 2 shots for the 3 strings that I shot, the first shot, the variance was 0.03 seconds, and the second shot was 0.02 seconds on the last 3 strings. To me, Chris, like, you got to be kidding me. I said, no, and you're shooting it the same way every single time, and that's what you need to be doing in practice. It's okay, you need to find out where your edge is, and then you need to back it off so you can see things and shoot it consistently. Because who cares if you go down and, oh, well, I shot a 289 in the match, but that went nice with the other 12 seconds that I shot.
Yeah. The other 3-4 second runs, it didn't really matter,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, a lot of the key, or one of my biggest keys to success in Steel Challenge has been consistency from, string to string and stage to stage. And they'll take out, a lot of times, a lot of these guys that are throwing down, or gals that are throwing down, oh, I shot that in 1.24 seconds, but you got to be able to do it over and over and over again, unless if you're on your fifth string. And so, yeah, there's a lot of cool functionality about the timer, but we got to get the timer guy on. I got some questions for him.
There we go. Well, I want to point out something to the shooters, and I've been able to shoot a lot of matches with you, not as many as I'd wish, but, we live 6.5 hours away from each other. I had a friend of mine, Gerald Reed, say to me, he goes, man, that Steve is consistent. I said, Steve knows at the end of the match, for the entire match, how many extra shots he took, and how many he took into his score.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something to think about, everybody. And it's not, oh, look how good Steve is, because he is. But that's not my point.
Oh, stop! I mean, come on, Jeff, keep talking some more.
My point is that extra shots cost time, and it doesn't matter how fast you're swinging that gun around. If you miss, it's going to cost you a minimum of 0.3, and probably more based on the plate. I mean, if you're swinging hard, say you're shooting pendulum and you're just going the standard 1, 2, 3, 4 stop, and you go 1, 2, 3 miss, you're probably going to transition off that plate, which means you now have to transition back to it, and then you're going to go back to the stop plate. That's probably going to take you more than 0.3.
Right.
But if you'd have taken that extra tenth of a second just to make sure that sight picture was there, you'd have crushed the stage, probably set a personal best. And that's something that when I watched Steve, I watched him shoot. Now, granted, it was roundabout, one of the easier stages, but still, he was fast. And it was 25 shots, and he was done.
Yeah.
There was no extras. And even when he was, he put four in the bank, that fifth, and to quote our good friend Tom Nalen, blind squirrel run wasn't at 150%. Because you didn't need to do 150%.
Yep.
You were probably at 115, maybe 120.
Yep.
Pushing those transitions, maybe pulling the trigger before you had the perfect sight picture, but you're going, I got 4 in the bag.
Oh, yeah.
So take that into account, people, because just think about how many, when you go home, just if you took 250 rounds of the match, how many you got left? That's all the extra shots you took. And then maybe try to figure out how many you actually took into score. How many non-5-shot strings did you take into score? It matters. It can make a big difference. Even 0.3 seconds on 2 strings a stage for every stage is 0.6 times 8 that's almost 5 seconds.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of placements that are separated, like in Rimfire Rifle Open in West Florida match, by 0.03 seconds. It's crazy. It's a fraction of a makeup shot, and it's some people don't like to hear their times, but early on the lesson that I learned was I had a great one. I was like, oh yeah, watch this. No, that was the wrong approach. And so for every single gun that I shoot, I know where my 100% or what I call the edge is, and I know where I need to be shooting 90% at. And over the course of the time, I can usually call the buzzer, I would say, within, a couple of hundreds, sometimes, 0.05 seconds, oh yeah, that was a 195. Oh no, it was 196. Oh, my bad. It's, but I think you need to have that level of awareness when you're shooting in order to stay in control and be in control. And I'm not sitting here saying you need to go 1-for-1 all the time, but you need to understand how fast you can shoot something before you start missing at that edge, and then be able to back it down
But
and
there's a
then
really good
manage
point.
it.
And that's something I tell a lot of people too is your 1-for-1 is going to be your fastest strings.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that's the key. I can't shoot 1-for-1 and shoot at your speed on a PCC.
Right.
Okay. I shouldn't try to be Steve Foster. I should be the best Jeff Jones I can be. And keep training and keep practicing and work on that and keep pushing. I think a lot of people think that, I have to go 1-for-1 and go fast. And you do. But you got to find, I love your description of the edge. And that, your first string in a match, what? You're maybe shooting at 90% of your edge. You're sitting there, okay, I'm going to get the feel. I'm going to get in. You're not going out at 110%.
Yeah, and be able to throttle that, like, at the West Florida Steel Challenge match. I know we talked a little bit about it last week, but I know that I'm not going to shoot 100% stage times there. And so even on roundabout, I think it was Rimfire Rifle Open, I shot a good 85, 90% round. Oh, okay. Then I tried to dial it up to like 95, and oh, man, what just happened? Then, you know what I mean? And then I backed it down and shot 3 more clean ones. But you got to be able to have that ability to control how fast you're shooting and moving the gun and have that level of awareness, which does take time. So if you think that you're going to shoot a monthly match once a month or twice a month and get better, you may, but you really need to practice in order to get better. And that's one of the things that Chris and I were talking about. I should have recorded the conversation and just played it, but one of the things that we talked about is the big difference in why people are getting better and whatnot is shooting more,
Yeah.
able to not go to it's different. You don't need to go to a range and dump 1,000 rounds every practice session. Yeah. Once a week, Chris and I probably burn through 750, 800, maybe even 1,000 rounds, in a 4 or 5 hour training session. But, during the week I'll shoot 150 or 200 here, 150, 200 there. And leading up to a big match, I may dump a little bit extra, but it's when you start shooting 100 rounds here, a couple hundred rounds there, they do add up over the course of a week to well over 1,000. But it's okay to take time off after a match, and I encourage that. And if you're getting frustrated with something, put the gun down for a little bit and come back to it in a couple of days or a week later, and then get out there and practice. But if you're frustrated and you're just burning ammo, there's probably better use of time. Go home and hug your family or something, man. It's
Good point.
Yeah, you don't need to be wasting ammo.
Steve, let me ask you one other question. It just came to mind, and we're talking about, shooting at the edge and shooting at 110, 120. When you've put those 4 strings in the bank, okay, and you're coming up and going, okay, I get my blind squirrel. Whether you call it that or not, we all know what it means. The one thing that I do, and I don't know if you do it or not, and that's why I want to get your perspective on it, is I'm not trying to turn a .75 or a .65 draw into a .45 draw.
Agreed.
Because you've immediately tanked the stage if you don't get that first shot.
Yeah. Yep.
So yep. I tend to maybe, I don't even want to say snap a little harder, maybe just dig in and maybe take a chance on that first shot, but really saying to myself, I'm going to try to make this up in more of the faster transitions.
Yeah, and I would do the same thing. I mean, if I went out there on some of these stages, and I think the fastest string time I've ever had in competition was 1.18 seconds. It was on Showdown. And that one, just messing around. We're at a local match, blah, blah. Hey, watch this. And literally I threw up the gun and transitioned the gun, looked over the top of the gun, and somehow was able to connect, pulling the trigger almost as fast, if not as fast as I could. But that aside, when I was at the World Speed Shoot, we're talking about Rimfire Rifle Open, and I think my first one was a 165 or somewhere in there, and it was a throwaway. And I had, I knew I had 4 good ones. The first shot, I did snap it just a little bit harder. My transitions were about the same, and then I just threw one at the stop plate. maybe I saw it, maybe I didn't, but that's where I picked up, and I shot a 142, I think. I don't know. I got it on video somewhere. But, it's just that kind of thing. And, on 5 to go, Grant and I were messing around one night at my house at the range and just, hey, how fast can you pull the trigger? Yeah, I could shoot it at 140 as well, but, maybe hit 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5, or maybe I got 5 out of 5 once in a while, but it's just not sustainable. So I'll go aggressive on the first one. I try to keep my transitions the same and try to throw one at a stop plate, because most stop plates outside of speed option are, pretty good plates that you can throw a shot at, kind of point shoot them. You know what I mean?
Yep, I do. Well, Steve, it's always great talking with you. I think we got a lot of good information out here about outer limits and some other things. I got nothing else. Do you got anything you want to say to the people?
I do. If you need something off of rangestore.net, use discount code STPodcast10 for 10% off. And thanks, everybody. Jeff, it was great talking with you tonight.
Thanks, Steve. Good talking with you. And don't forget, one shot, one steal.